Welcome back to the Picky Picker. So today we're going to talk about tension. This in front of you is my everyday carry. So I've got my heavy tension bars, I've got some medium ones, and then I've got some lighter and smaller ones at the end here. So what you will generally find is that having a selection of tensioners will actually help you in the long run. But to be totally honest, out of these thick ones, medium ones, and some with some smaller ends on there, literally I only ever use two. I carry these every day, but ultimately that one and that one, they're the two that I use almost 90% of the time. Why is that? So starting with this thick bar here, it's like 30 thousandths thick, possibly even 40 thousandths. I'm not too sure actually. It's quite old. I've had it for a while, but this one came from Sparrows, if I remember rightly. And this is used in a lot of the larger locks or the locks that have heavy springs. But for nearly everything else, almost without fail, it's this one over here that I use. And the reason I use it is because, it's extremely narrow, it's extremely thin, and I've got options where I can go top of the keyway using the short side, or I can go bottom of the keyway using the longer side. For 95% of the locks that I ever pick, it's this one. So having said that, some of these other tensioners I do use from time to time, but I generally don't need to carry them on me, and it's very rare that I even do use them, even though I do carry them. Finally, there's the odd one out. This one, I don't know that I've ever used it once. I don't generally come across the locks that require this big of a tension tool at one end, and this end is so short that even on an American 1100 or something like that, where I may have used it, it's just not long enough to get down into the hole. Taking something like this American 1100, if I use this longer end of the tension bar, I can actually get down into there, because as you can see it's quite deep. If I use the other end, I'm literally hitting this bolt, and what will then happen is I basically pop out. And it doesn't have to be that big locks require big tensioners, because this is one of the larger locks that I practice on a regular basis, but because it's such a small keyway, then just a very, very small tensioner is all that's needed to get into there. So I can quite easily just drop a tensioner in there like that, and it stays out of the way and allows me to pick the rest of the lock. In fact, a lot of these disc style locks, they all seem to take the same size tensioner. I don't need anything big down there. If we take something like this Master Lock 410, I can use my small tensioner in there, and whilst that does work, I'm almost at 180 degrees this way, and because there's no spring inside here and this is dead core, I've now got 90 degrees of movement before I can turn the core the other way. So in this particular example, I would go for something thicker. Again, the one that I never use, that won't fit down there. But if I take a thicker one like this would be one of the few times that I might use something like that, because I can put it in there and now I can tension this way and be able to pull it back if I need to counter rotate the core in the opposite direction. So with locks like these, how much tension is enough, or how much is too much? This is an important question that all lock pickers at some point or another are going to ask themselves. If I take, for instance, this American 1100, one of the issues that I ran into was if I go online and look at what is conventional wisdom, everybody says you need really, really feather light tension. Well, how light is feather light? Is it enough tension that I can, for instance, push this key? Is it that amount of force that I need to use? Or is it, enough to be able to push something like this or like this one even? So it's a very subjective term, and you never see people say, oh, you need so many ounces of pressure or grams of pressure or whatever. You never see that. So this then became a problem for me, and in the case of the American 1100, for the longest time I was using extremely light pressure and I just could not get this lock open. I have now come to the conclusion that there's a video that the lockpicking lawyer did, and what he basically said, if I paraphrase it, is that if you give something as much tension pressure as it will take and still open, then that's probably the amount that you want. And I kind of agree with that now, having been through something like that with the 1100. So if I take something like, my thick bar here and I put it in there, the amount of tension I need is actually quite high. And then I can just sort of quickly get down in there and that one and this one. There we go. It can be gotten open very, very quickly, I find, when I've got a lot of tension in there. But if I just reset this again, but if I only have a little tension in there, it was absolutely impossible for me. I found it extremely difficult. So, I agree with the lockpicking lawyer that heavy tension was better than light tension. And then if we take the 410, everybody says that this one needs extremely light tension. For me, I found extremely light was not helpful. Going somewhat sort of medium light to medium, that was more helpful. I got clearer clicks out of this, and I can get it open a lot faster than if I was to use, extremely heavy tension or extremely light tension. If we go back to the lock that we were using the other week in video number 2, this one again, the amount of tension on it was medium, I would say. You want it to be light enough that you could possibly push like a cup across a table. So if you can kind of work out how much force that kind of feels like, that's about how much you would need to push down when you're using your tensioner. And the other thing to remember is that if you put your finger out at the end, so let's say I put a tensioner in there, having my finger up here, I can't really feel what's going on, and any pressure I put down, it's going to be extremely diluted because we've only got a short amount of tensioning tool here. If I put my finger out at the end, now I don't have to push so hard, but I'm also transferring far more tension up the tensioning tool, and so I can also then feel what's going on clearer as well coming back the other way. So it's very important that you put your finger out if you can. Don't be like this, and especially don't sort of do anything silly like having two fingers up here or anything like that. Like you're going to make life difficult for yourselves. So keep your finger straight, keep your tensioning tool long if possible, and try to keep your finger out. Now obviously this is going to cause problems when you've got a one like this, where now it's not like your finger is out here somewhere, it's going straight up, and because the lock is also not straight, you're actually having to do a weird sort of thing with your wrist to try and keep things straight that way. That's why I always find it's easier just to turn the lock, just embrace the fact that it's not straight, and then from here I can come in and just basically pick it upside down and just force my way up that way. So tensioning is something that definitely it requires as much skill and thought as the actual picking part, and so that's what I want to leave you with today. Consider, are you using the correct tool for the job? Consider where your finger is along the tensioning tool, and also consider how much pressure you're giving. If a lock doesn't want to open with light pressure, change the pressure, try something harder. If it's so hard that everything's binding up, obviously you need to go lighter. So, to go back to what the lockpicking lawyer was saying, use as heavy as you can without it basically binding up. That I guess is the message that he was trying to say. But also, take heed from the community, but remember that every lock could be different, and your lock may not behave the same as other people's locks. So don't put too much weight on what the community says. Try to go with your gut feel on your own lock. So I'll leave you with that today, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.